Nvidia finally dropped their prices, making a lot more of their cards much more compelling, which would concern Intel and AMD if they hadn't dropped their prices too, which means we have seen a big mix-up in the best value GPUs. Let me explain. The problem that is shopping for a graphics card is that the GPUs you could buy range anywhere from 6% inflated to 45% discounted. So what are the best value GPUs right now? Well, Intel Arc A750s and 6600s can be had for less than $200. Nvidia G6X 3060 Ti's can be had as low as $320, and the current generation continues to be more and more discounted. So with how the GPU market has been shaping up recently, we're going to evaluate every one of the 36 current and previous generation graphics cards. We're going to look at price compared to MSRP, and also see if they're trending lower or higher compared to recent months. Then quantify and compare value between every one of them to find out which graphics cards are winners and which ones are losers. Then at the end, I'm going to give my recommendations for Nvidia, AMD, and Intel for budget, mid-range, and high-end to find out which graphics card is right for you. Because the best value card didn't actually get my recommendation. Let me explain. So you're thinking about an upgrade, but prices are holding you back. Well, there's two ways that I can help you out with that. You can either offset the cost by selling what you currently own, or even make your upgrade more affordable with today's video sponsor, Jawa. Jawa is an online marketplace specifically designed for gamers by gamers, where users and listings are pre-approved to make sure that buyers are not being taken advantage of and prices are fair, which I think we can all get behind. But what if you want to make money instead? Well, sellers can also benefit in a number of ways. Jawa takes a smaller fee compared to eBay, and will even outright buy your graphics card from you if you need a quicker, hassle-free sale. But these are only my favorite features of the platform. They also have a vibrant community, commission builds, and a 4.7 Trustpilot rating. So what are you waiting for? Make your next upgrade more affordable by clicking on the Jawa sponsor link below. So the first place that we need to start is take a look at retail prices, what they're like compared to MSRP, and see if cards have been getting cheaper or more expensive, before we then take a look at GPU performance. Here we have the MSRP represented in pink and defined down the vertical axis, versus the real world prices I collected over the last month in blue. And I'll explain how we collect those a bit later on. But things are mostly looking good. In fact, nearly every GPU on here is below MSRP, and that is the first time that we have been able to say that. In fact, the only GPU that we have recorded over MSRP is the RTX 3080 12GB, which has been massively inflated for quite some time now. Sub 200 RX 6600s may be a fantastic deal, and $600 RX 6950 XTs are a regular appearance, which may be the best value high-end GPU right now, but has a bit of competition for the 7900 XT, which has also dropped by a healthy amount, and I'm excited to see which one of those offer the best value when we compare that a bit later on. In fact, there is one thing that shouldn't have surprised me looking over this data. RTX 3000 low end is potentially, for the first time ever, below its multi-year old MSRP, with the newer G6X 3060 Ti dropping by over $100, which was Nvidia's best value GPU last time. So with a $100 discount, it's going to be interesting how it stacks up to AMD in terms of value. But the reason why this shouldn't have surprised me so much is that we did predict these price drops would happen when Nvidia releases their lower end current generation, like the RTX 4060 Ti for $400, which likely won't change until Nvidia painstakingly fills out the rest of their 4000 series. This is because it's the first time Nvidia are competing with themselves at this price tier, which has been marked orange for the RTX 4060 Ti, as it was released midway through the time period that we are analysing, which is the month of May, and the same for the 7600. But when we pull up the same data from the last video to compare, we can see that almost everything has had further price reductions. In fact, the only thing that I didn't really anticipate is the A770 8GB, which has gone back up to its MSRP. But the A750 is recently dropped by just under 10% and is actually not far off in terms of performance, but this contributes to Intel Arc being on average less discounted compared to Nvidia Ampere, which is the first time that we've seen that happen. RDNA 2 still holds the top spot for most discounted architecture overall, and the new generation continues to slowly get more discounted. Likely because you guys watch videos like these and understand that new and shiny is not as important as performance per dollar, which we will check out after I show you something new and extremely exciting. Here we have tracked lowest prices going back to the end of January. Every single one of these data points is the lowest price I can find for that model on that day, which is exactly how we build our real world prices. We take the lowest 10% over the time period that we are looking at, which I believe best reflects what I would consider a relative good price for that model. So if you can't find the model that you want at the price shown in this video, check the comment section below. Check it today, the next day, the day after. It is updated almost daily to give you the most accurate prices whenever you watch this video. But the other benefit is that we can also see a trend line for each model and potentially forecast where prices will end up. But I can confirm that prices have been declining, especially as more new generation cards are released. And I expect this to be one of the biggest reasons for the recent price drops. So I do want to spend a bit more time analyzing and forecasting this data for a future video, but let me know what you think in the comments section. What you think will happen next month? What factors do you think will influence prices, and who will raise prices or drop prices the most? But before we cover my GPU recommendations this month for budget, mid-range and high-end, we need to understand value, because a cheap graphics card is not the same as a good value card. So to figure out which one of these cards are good value, we need to analyze and compare their performance. Let me show you. So before we take a look at which are the best cards and my recommendations for budget, mid-range and high-end, let's start with what GPUs you should focus on for 1080p, 1440p and 4K. We're taking a look down the graph. Any GPU that we have listed here will be capable of 1080p 60 frames per second in most games, but if you want to better utilize your high refresh monitor, I recommend looking at the average frame rate and matching that against your monitor's refresh rate, meaning 6700 or 3060 Ti or better for 1080p 120Hz, making this the breakdown for 1440p and 4K, the ones that I would recommend focusing on as we move into our value comparison, which means it is time to show off the surprising underdog that is the new performance per dollar king. What we have here is a cost, frame rate and value comparison graph compared to using a resolution of 1440p. 1080p and 4K will be up next. On the left-hand side, we have all of the GPUs with their real-world price, which the blue bar also represents. The white bar shows the average frame rate, and the pink is the calculated value in cost per frame. Quantifying value this way allows us to see the best and worst value cards for each manufacturer. And for 1440p, the best value includes the newer RTX 3060 G6X version for Nvidia, same as last time. The RX 6600 now beats the 6650 XT for AMD this time around, and the best value card overall for 1440p surprisingly goes to Intel Arc with the A750, coming in about 1% cheaper than AMD's best value. But this is where value starts to separate from what I'm personally recommending a bit later on. We'll have to come back to A750 concerns. But the 7900 XTX is still the worst value AMD card here, thanks to recent price drops of the XT, making it about 10% better value over the XTX. The A770 8GB being the same price as the 16GB version puts it in last place for Intel, and Nvidia's 3090 is now worse value compared to the 3090 Ti after recent price drops, also making it the worst value 1440p card overall. But it's no coincidence that the lower end cards tend to typically provide better value, and this is most obvious in the new generation, with the 7600 being AMD's best value so far, if it does stay at that $270 price mark, but isn't as compelling compared to a same price, higher performance, 2GB more memory, 6700. Such a shame. The 4060 Ti comes in at 3070 performance for 3070 price, but will have DLSS 3 and be more efficient, though both have 8GB of memory, which we will take into consideration when I recommend models. Moving into 4K, we're going to want to pay even closer attention to average frame rate, as the A750, the 6600 and the newer 3060 Ti still technically provide the best value, but only the 3060 Ti can average 60 frames per second in our test suite, while the others cannot, making the 6750 XT from AMD the best value card that can hit over 60 frames per second average, but only marginally beating the 3060 Ti. For higher end shoppers, the 6950 XT continues to be very compelling compared to the new generation, and even at 4K. The 3090 is just so far ahead for worst value card, and brings us onto the most popular resolution. Let's take a look at 1080p, which, as we can see, the 6600 at $180 comes out on top this month, narrowly beating the A750 for best value 1080p card overall, and crowning a new champion this time around. The GDDR6X 3060 Ti wins for Nvidia by a proportionally significant amount, especially when comparing everything else, so a very compelling card for Nvidia buyers. But when it comes to the worst value, the 3090 and 90 Ti win for joint last place, and would be a horrible gaming choice, even compared to a 4080, which provides more performance and features for less money. The A770 8GB unsurprisingly loses for Intel, and the 7900 XTX is a worse value AMD card at 1080p, even though it does have the best value out of the top 3 highest performing cards on the market. But the thing to consider while you look over the graphs is we've been comparing pure gaming performance, or rasterization, which makes sense given that's what most people are doing. But just because something has the best value doesn't mean that it's the one that I would choose or recommend when we take into context other factors. Stuff like memory capacity, professional applications, upscaling, ray tracing support. These are all things that could affect how long the card is usable in modern or future scenarios. So let me show you which cards I would buy for each manufacturer, covering budget, mid-range, and high-end. As mentioned previously in this series, we allow budget, mid-range and high-end to be self-defined by the market. What this means is that we split out all current and previous generation cards evenly into those categories, which then quantifies the price, making budget up to $280 this time, mid-range up to $580, and high-end everything after that. So let's cover the best GPUs for each manufacturer within those market segments. I'm going to lightly touch on the pros and cons for each, but we go into much more detail as to why you should go for one manufacturer over another in this video. I'll also highlight memory capacity, where I see concerns, and you can learn more as to why 8GB and lower may be an issue by watching this video, before I then leave you with a couple standout winners. Up-to-date prices will be in the comments section, and let's start with budget. This is the first time that Intel has taken the crown for best value graphics card overall, with the A750, providing a decent 1080p and good 1440p experience. But as I mentioned in our manufacturer comparison video, you are going to get a very first generation experience, and it's difficult to recommend it for most people. The RX 6600 on the other hand can often be found for less than $200 and is a more mature platform and software solution, while also being slightly better value at 1080p gaming, which is a perfect use case for this card. The 6700 on the other hand gives you about 30% more performance for just over 30% more cost, making it slightly worse value, but has 10GB of memory instead of 8, and could see its useful lifespan extended because of this. So if you have a bit more money to spend, that would be my recommendation. The only Nvidia card that makes any sense here is the RTX 3060 12GB, a bit more expensive compared to the 6700 and about 15 to 20% less performance, but will give you Nvidia features, better professional application support, and the largest memory capacity in this market segment. Mid-range opens up a lot more options at up to $580, but neither of the Intel cards make any sense here. The saving grace for the A750 was that even though the architecture has inherent issues, it still is the best value. But the two A770s don't even have that on their side, so they are a solid pass. Nvidia on the other hand has the newer G6X 3060 Ti, which can be had for around $320 on a good day, and is the best value Nvidia card overall. Honestly, if you need Team Green at this price range, keep an eye out for this one. A fantastic 1080p card, even with 8GB of memory, and over 100 frames per second at 1440p in our test suite, while only narrowly being beaten out by a couple AMD cards in terms of value, which is a very rare thing to say for Nvidia. The 6800 XT is a great mid to high refresh 1440p option, but the 6750 XT is the best value mid-range card this time around. Same price as the 3060 Ti, but with slightly more power and 50% more memory, making it the best gaming-only recommendation for mid-range. The card that makes the most sense at the high end is still the 6950 XT, with a whopping $500 price drop, fantastic mid to high refresh 1440p, and very capable 4K card. You could save an extra $20 and go with the 6900, but the 6950 seems to be more often better priced, and will likely make you more than an extra $20 when you go to sell it. The newer generation still isn't as compelling as I would have hoped, but the 7900 XT with recent further discounts makes the most sense right now. About 15% worse value with about 10% more performance, though you do get an extra 4GB of memory. For Nvidia high-end, it's kind of hard. If the 4070 Ti had 16GB of memory, that would make things easier, but I would also like to see the 4080 closer to $1,000. So the lesser of two evils is probably the 4070 Ti. Making the 4 standout recommendations, the AMD 6600 at around $180 for ultimate 1080p value, and a more consistent experience compared to the A750. The RTX 3060 Ti GDDR6X version being the best value Nvidia card by a decent amount. Great for 1080p mid to high refresh and 1440p gaming at around $320. The 6750 XT being the best value mid-range card for gamers and a nice 12GB of memory for the same price, and the 6950 XT being the best value high-end option with its massive price drop. They're actually the same price new as they are used, which is kind of crazy. But that doesn't answer the question, why should you choose one manufacturer over the other? Clearly AMD cards have better value, and that's the only thing that matters, right? Well, there are technically more reasons to go for an Nvidia card. Stuff like ray tracing, upscaling, professional applications. These are all important considerations when choosing your next GPU, and not all cards are built to take advantage of these features in the same way. But also not all of these features are applicable to everyone. So to find out which manufacturer is right for you, you can check that video out by clicking here. And to understand why 8GB graphics cards are struggling at the moment, we break down both the argument and the counter argument in this video. And you can check that out by clicking here. Otherwise guys, share, like, subscribe, they are always appreciated, and I hope you have an amazing day.